Hello, I'm Dr. Barbara Sills-Nevergold, co-founder of the Uncrowned Queens Institute. Welcome to They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders. This program brings you the inspiring and sometimes little-known stories of the women and men who have made or are making a difference in our community. Today's guest is a very special young woman who I've had the pleasure to meet, Dr. Amma Ghartey-Tagoe Kootin, affectionately known as Dr. Amma, is working on a project that is near and dear to my heart. Dr. Amma is a gifted dramatist and dedicated historian who is combining her artistic gift and historical researcher expertise to create a musical that will tell the story of the role that Buffalo's African Americans played in the Pan American Exposition. However, before I talk to Dr. Amma about her musical production at Buffalo, I want to offer the viewers a brief overview so that we can put the conversation into perspective. So, with your permission, Dr. Amma, let me set the stage with a little bit of the backstory on a few of the characters in your play. In 1899, plans were being made to bring the Pan American Exposition to Buffalo in 1901. The exposition promised to bring displays highlighting all the modern advances of civilization, such as electricity and baby incubators, as well as a midway that would feature exotic exhibits, carnival rides, and ethnic restaurants. The organizers expected millions of visitors. That same year, a new organization of Black women, the Phyllis Wheatley Club, was founded. The women quickly mobilized to advocate for African American involvement in the expo. At the time, Buffalo's Black community was comprised of only 1,698 inhabitants, yet within a year of its founding, the Phyllis Wheatley Club's membership exceeded 150 club women. In November 1900, the club signaled its intent to confront actions, even at the highest level, that excluded Blacks from participation in the Pan American Exposition. They staged a protest rally, which attracted over 200 participants. It was a bold move on their part, but these women understood the economic and social-political importance of World's Fairs and wanted their community to share in the anticipated prosperity that 8 million fairgoers would generate. They also saw an opportunity to inform and educate white American fairgoers about the progress made by African Americans since emancipation through the imagery of the Negro exhibit. This exhibit, created by W.E.B. Du Bois, was first displayed at the Paris Exposition of 1900. Importantly, it presented a stark contrast to the images of Blacks portrayed on the Pan Am's midway by the only two official living exhibits planned for the expo: the old plantation, which included an actual plantation with cotton crops and slave shanties, as well as a theater where minstrel shows took place, and Darkest Africa, which also featured natives dressed in scanty clothing, living in huts and performing authentic savage rituals. The protest rally was designed to force the Pan Am's Board of Managers to include the Negro exhibit as the third exhibit at the Pan Am, an affirmative advocacy stance. The women also protested the failure of the Board of Managers to appoint a representative of the race to that body. The group advocated for one of its own, Mary B. Talbert, cited as the most accomplished Black woman in the community. Black women used this rally to promote positive images of Blacks as offered by a contemporary exhibit and a widely respected Black woman. And you know what? They were successful in bringing the Negro exhibit to Buffalo. So now, Dr. Amma, we're back.
Yes.
And I thank you for indulging me in doing this, giving this backstory. But welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you.
It is a joy to be here and a wonderful honor to me and the team to have this conversation with you, Dr. Barbara. We see you as one of the foremost historians of Black Buffalo history, and so thank you.
Well, thank you. And let me start off by saying to you, I'm so pleased to, as I said, have had the pleasure to meet you, and the work that you're doing is so exciting. But I want you to tell our visitors, who's Dr. Amma?
Oh, that's a great question. So who is Dr. Amma? I am first and foremost a child of God, born of two fantastic Ghanaian immigrants, Dr. Nana Benin Ghartey-Tagoe and Mrs. Amma Ghartey-Tagoe, who's the Einstein of our family. And they immigrated here to North America, met in Canada, fell in love in Toronto, got married there, and then they moved down to Tuskegee, Alabama, where they had my two older sisters and me. And so as the child of as a first generation Ghanaian immigrant in the US, and being born in the historic town of Tuskegee, where Booker T. Washington, the Tuskegee Institute is located, and growing up in Manhattan, Kansas from the age of 9 onwards, I have had this fantastic experience as a human being in the United States of the diversity of the African and African American experience in this country. And so a lot of the things that I do come from the fantastic family stock, the home life that my parents provided us. Education was always paramount, and universities were our literal playgrounds. My father's a professor, my mom worked at a university, and when we moved to Manhattan, Kansas, the same thing. Kansas State became a university playground. So I've always felt at home in academic spaces, and I'm the baby of the family. So I'm the theatrical drama queen who will always say that I'm the baby, even when I'm 95 years old.
And our viewers can see, yes, what makes you dramatic.
And so, and my students, they tease me to this day, because now I am a university professor at the University of Georgia, and they call me Dr. Amma, or drama with the extra M when you put it all together. And so I see my life truly as a divinely written story that's still unfolding of a human being who has various gifts and talents, about bringing history to the stage and screen, and to make it come to life for all of us. I fundamentally am convinced that when we know our past, we can be better informed about our present and make better decisions about our future.
Absolutely, it's beautifully said. So we had the opportunity to meet around the drama that you are currently working on. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, called At Buffalo.
Yes.
We're rapidly coming, though, to a break in this segment of the program. And so we're going to take a break for a minute, and when we come back, we're going to talk about At Buffalo and how you got involved in that and what brought you to Buffalo, at Buffalo, right? Thank you, and please stay tuned. We'll be right back with Dr. Amma.
Save a place for me, save a space for me, in your heart, in your heart.
Every year, the United Negro College Fund helps thousands of students go to college. But for everyone we help, there's one we can't. Please support the United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Hello, I'm Barbara Sills Nevergold. Welcome back to They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders. And today I'm having really a very lively conversation with Dr. Amma. Dr. Amma is a visiting professor at the University of Buffalo, and we talked about what brought you to Buffalo. This is not the first time you came to Buffalo. You came in 2002 on a mission.
Yes.
And what was that mission?
In 2002, I was a graduate student at NYU Tisch School of the Arts in the Department of Performance Studies. In my first semester, the only class that had the word history in it was a class called History of World's Fairs, taught by Professor Barbara Kirshenblatt-Gimblett. And my work is, how do you use theater, film, and television to tell history, and how does performance affect the ways in which members of the African diaspora come to see and understand each other? So in any class, you of course have to choose a topic. And I chose originally the 1893 Chicago World's Fair because I had to write a paper, but someone had just put out a book. So I went to the next big World's Fair, the 1901 Buffalo, New York, Pan American Exposition. Now, in general, World's Fairs, I didn't really know what they were. I had a vague sense from photographs, but they seemed like they were boring entities. I didn't know what they were. But the more I learned in that class that they were spaces where Disney World meets carnivals, meets museums and the Olympics, all the size of a miniature city, I said, this is theater, but theater on a grand city scale. And so I chose Buffalo after reading a chapter in Robert Rydell's All the World's a Fair. And lo and behold, when I looked up and said, I need to get into these archives in Buffalo, this city had just celebrated the centennial.
Right.
In 2001, the 100-year anniversary of the fair. So all of the museums and archives, the Buffalo History Museum, the Buffalo Museum of Science, the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library, Uncrowned Queens Project, had online exhibits of the 1901 Pan Am. And I, in grad school, most folks will use their money to, go out, watch a movie, and do laundry. I decided I'm going to use my money to hop on JetBlue, $59 tickets to Buffalo, and get into the archives and just grab as much as I could and from these archival sources to just make sense of what the story is. For historians, we know it's the archival material, the fragments and pieces of the past that help us understand what took place back then. So that's what brought me here on a mission, just to understand what is this story, because there were glimpses and descriptions of these three conflicting visions of Blackness. And your introduction at the top of the show wonderfully explains that, the Buffalo community had this fantastic protest rally, and the archival material said they were like, we are unanimous and indignant at this discrimination, and they got the Negro exhibit here. And so my question is, what then happened when all of these distinct groups of Black folk found themselves in the fair?
That's wonderful. Well, succinctly, you brought all of these together. One of the things that we found in the research that we were doing with Uncrowned Queens was that there was a question mark around whether or not the Negro exhibit actually got here.
Right.
So there was this mystery, I guess, and certainly that kind of information must have enhanced as well your research and your question about, what happened with all of these various, and we call them Africans, darkies, Negroes.
Right, right. Ours are savages, darkies, and Negroes, right? Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually a beautiful part of the story of the Pan Am, the historiography, right, of this World's Fair, is that archivists played a critical role in bringing to light answers to part of the mystery. So my understanding, it was William Lewes at Buffalo and Erie County Public Library and the archivist there that found that souvenir pamphlet from the Negro exhibit with a picture of the exhibit that looks very different from the 1900 Paris installation that has James Ross and another man standing next to him in that photograph. And when they brought that to light, that became a wonderful moment for us to correct the history. And you played a pivotal role in us understanding what having that exhibit meant here for Buffalo.
So when you came and you began to look in the archives here and realize how rich and really how understated and underreported or documented the history was, what did you do with that information once you went back? I know you were working on your dissertation, correct, or a paper at that point. So this became a subject for you to follow up on your dissertation.
Right. The archival material immediately was singing to me. I heard the music. The fair was a musical fair. So as I was reading these newspaper articles from the Pan American Exposition newspaper scrapbook collection, 24 volumes that the Buffalo Erie County Public Library has, and getting into the exposition records at the Buffalo History Museum, I could hear it singing, and I said, this has to be performed. And even more, for me to understand what these things are, like descriptions of a man named Laughing Ben, who would laugh for 30 seconds to a minute each time, while telling stories of being a slave. I said, I have to feel that in my body. I need to see what it looks like, and most of all, what happens when audiences encounter this archival material in their own terms. So I went back, had to write that paper, but I knew that it was a musical. I asked my department, can I write a musical for my dissertation? They said no. But that was before Hamilton, so now I think everything will shift. But you know, because at that moment, my field of performance studies wanted to make sure that we could be in academia and books are understood.
Right.
Right. But I always knew that this was a musical, and I knew. I played with it in my master's, for my master's final project, when the short 10-minute scene with actors trying to work virtually verbatim, not virtually, but verbatim from archival material, and having actors perform Laughing Ben, perform the various vignettes of these attractions, and to see what happens for the audience in that way. And that 10-minute short scene work, I knew it was a musical. I knew it was called At Buffalo. I don't know why I knew it was called At Buffalo, and I knew that it needed to be created for the Broadway stage. So from there, I did my dissertation, which allowed me to get into over 20 archives across the country and the world, including Ghana, West Africa, because that's the thing about these World's Fairs. You'll be surprised how the material has spread beyond Buffalo. It's at the UCLA
So
library.
let me just stop you a minute. So you're saying that you were able to find in the archives throughout the world in various places in Ghana
Yes.
and information from the Buffalo World's Fair.
Absolutely.
From the Pan Am.
Which shows us how important Buffalo is. How
Yes,
Buffalo's story is America's story and the world's story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And very much undertold.
Right.
Very, so undertold.
Right. And you know, part of the blessing of it taking me 15 years to come back to Buffalo after developing finishing the dissertation, developing it in a postdoc residency at University of California, Berkeley, where I then was able to test it with students in a full-length semester process called Black Theater Workshop that Margaret Wilkerson, that historic class Margaret Wilkerson created for Berkeley, allowed me to see that this could be a musical. That's where I met my two current collaborators, Khalil Sullivan and Joshua Williams. And then I took the work to my first faculty position at University of Colorado Boulder, where we received a large grant to form the professional team, and I was able to bring on Jim Augustine, New York theater entrepreneur, and also work with Deidre Harrington, creative producer of the Movement Theater Company at Harlem, to test it with professionals. And the more we were able to develop it and still adapting the archival material to the stage, we became convinced that we had to come back to Buffalo. And that opportunity, I have to tell you about.
Okay, so we're gonna stop here because this is very exciting. And I want you to return because we're gonna learn why Dr. Amma has come back to Buffalo after 15 years. Please stay tuned.
Weight loss, it's one of the many ways to fight osteoarthritis pain. For more information on managing pain, go to fightarthritispain.
Hello, I'm Barbara Sills Nevergold, and welcome back to They've Got Stories to Tell. We're having an exciting conversation today with Dr. Amma, who is a visiting professor from the University of Georgia at the University of Buffalo, and she is visiting in the drama department.
Yep, theater and dance.
Theater and dance, because she has been working on an exciting production, a musical at that is going to tell us the history. We're going to go be on Broadway in Buffalo. We're going to be on Broadway. The history of African American involvement in the Pan Am.
Yes.
And I know that you've been here for about 5 months. And during that time, what have you been doing?
Great question. You know, so I am here under a visiting professorship hosted by the Department of Theater and Dance, Romance Languages and Literature, as well as Transnational Studies. And truly, you know, under the inspiration of Professor Christian Flaw and Lindsay Hunter, who invited my team and I about a year and a half ago to do a keynote, to present about our work. We knew, my team and I knew we had to come back to Buffalo to finish the work. There's no way that we could finish the musical without coming to Buffalo and allowing the city and its people to inspire us and to make sure that we're getting the story right. And so this visiting professorship, combined with a creative arts initiative, artists in residence program that has allowed me to bring my team up, has given us the opportunity to test and revise the script in deep collaboration with each other, with the archives, that have given us the material for the narrative, to finally meet historians like you and work with Lillian Williams, whose book Strangers in the Land of Paradise and is the foremost authority on Mary Talbert, to inform the correctness of our script, has been simply a divine gift. And in this time, my husband and I, Kenneth Kootin, who's the documentarian, documents everything about our process, we have been inspired by this city. And we were able to revise our script with 8 new songs, as my collaborator Josh brought to our attention, in less than a week's time with our development producer, Deidre Harrington, our development director, Tamala Woodard, of Pop-Up Theatrics, who's fantastic, and Buffalo music director, Jason Bravo, to see what works and what doesn't. And combining our we had 7 New York City professional actors and 3 local Buffalo professional actors, and as well as UB students, we were able to do a 2-night stage reading testing, showing the results of what the work sounds now. What the work sounds like now.
I had the pleasure to be involved in that and to be part of that.
Yes.
And you've mentioned Hamilton.
Yes.
And I am so looking forward to this musical, because the way in which you have combined the history, which you've been faithful to the history, is really critical. And I hope our viewers understand, how significant that is. People can do musicals, and I understand that it's not easy necessarily, but to be able to be faithful to the narrative of the history, especially 100 years ago, means that you've spent, dedicated a lot of time to making sure that you get it right.
Right. Because there's so much at stake.
Yes.
There's so much that we don't know, and it's a story that has to be known, given the fact that Mary Talbert herself was considered the most well-known African American woman of the early 20th century in the United States.
And unfortunately, and I know you mentioned my good friend Lillian Williams, Dr. Lillian Williams, and her, the fact that she is the authority on Mary B. Talbert, but Mary B. Talbert has not gotten, the significant recognition for her role, the role that she played at that point in civil rights.
Right.
In the civil rights movement.
Right, and even club women, right?
Yes, and even club women.
Club women as well. You had a national network, a national association of colored women, and they are just amazing women.
Yes.
Amazing
and she was
leaders.
the national president for 4 years.
And so there's so much at stake in telling the story right that we feel compelled to do that. And part of what the musical is at Buffalo, a new musical, aims to be what we call an archivally true, historically plausible story. That means we started out with the endeavor of trying to make the musical verbatim from the archive. But as we know, especially for stories of African and African Americans, the archive is either biased in that time period in descriptions of those experiences, or they're completely silent. So how do we still tell our stories when the archive doesn't have everything? And that's the beauty of theater. Theater becomes the space in which, rooted in historical plausibility, that means vetting it against historical context, just even putting ourselves in their shoes from a theatrical and historical point of view, we can start to fill in those holes. And at Buffalo aims to do that, and aims to do that to be as rigorous as a scholar who can read the script and see the footnotes and see the arguments on stage, and as entertaining that it can sell out audiences, right, and houses. And that's what we aim to do, to show a scholartistic, to use my colleague Joe Shahadi's phrase, approach of telling this story.
Well, as per usual on this program, the time goes up by so quickly. We've got a couple minutes left. And in that time, I want you to tell us what you anticipate in terms of a time frame. What do we expect to see at Buffalo?
Great question. So most people may not know that typically Broadway musicals have a 5 to 7 year kind of creation period from beginning to end, typically. And there's so many different ways in which Broadway musical theater can be made in advance. And most people don't even say up front that they're developing their work for Broadway. We're intentional about saying that because we believe in disrupting the commercial spaces for these stories that need to be told. And we are in that 7-year typical timeline. We're in year 5, where we are solidifying the story structure through this residency. And then the next step is a workshop production, where we hope to develop it at a regional theater or off-Broadway New York Theater House to test it in front of audiences. We're at the point we have to see what it is like with design elements in place. And then that can move from an out-of-town tryout or a regional theater off-Broadway engagement to a Broadway venue. Or it might be that we have investors that see it right now and say, we want to back it and let's develop it right now.
I am so excited about it. I'm so pleased to have met you and to have been a small part of this process, of this production. I'm looking forward to actually seeing it on stage. What I've seen thus far has been tremendous. I applaud you. I thank you, love you for all that you've done. I'm sorry that we are coming to the end of our program. It happened so quickly. We've got about a minute left, so is there something you want to say in 20 seconds?
Yes. I want to say thank you. Thank you to the City of Buffalo for your gracious generosity to my family, to my creative team, to the University at Buffalo, to the Buffalo Museum of Science, Buffalo History Museum, Buffalo and Erie County Public Library, to all of these historians who have been doing the work. I know it's been tiring. I know your work has been unseen for so long, but because of your willingness, Dr. Williams, Dr. Monroe Fordham, Dr. Nevergold, Peggy Briggs Burcham, so many that I could name, people can hear it now, and people have the strength to tell those stories. So I like to just thank the City of Buffalo for giving America a story that can heal race relations.
And thank you, Dr. Amma. This has been They've Got Stories to Tell, Conversations with Uncrowned Community Builders, a program of the Uncrowned Queens Institute. We invite and encourage you to visit our website at uncrowncommunitybuilders.com to learn more about the lives and contributions of the uncrowned queens and kings we are spotlighting in this program. You can also watch this program on the UCB YouTube channel at UCB Conversations. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to you returning next week for another broadcast on the same station.